All right. The Texans have interviewed two coordinators that we know of, potential offensive coordinators. One, Gerod Johnson, who most of us know pretty well. If you're an Aggie, you know him real well. If you're a Texans fan, you know he's been working with C.J. Stroud the last couple of years. He's got relatively limited coaching experience compared to a lot of the other candidates, including Jeff Nixon, who we're also going to talk about. I'll probably hit Jeff Nixon first. And I know, and understandably, a lot of you are starting to get to wondering, like, okay, why have they only interviewed two guys, and one was in-house and one was a guy that, unless you're big into the ACC or you follow the passing records and whatnot, you don't know a whole lot about Jeff Nixon. Jeff Nixon did a really good job with Syracuse, and we'll get into that as Andy commanded me to look at his NFL experience as a coach and what he did in Syracuse last year. Andy, what do you think I brought you here for? What do you think I'm just gonna say no? It's not. Hey, everybody, it's not Jeff Nixon, the defensive back from the 1980s. It's actually a guy who's about my age, who'd have graduated college from Penn State in like 1996. No, Jeff Nixon's been at Baylor. He's been at Syracuse last year, where Kyle McCord led the nation in passing, and he's also been in the NFL a really good chunk since 2007. Most of his experience has been in the NFL, and we'll get to Gerod Johnson and some of the potential strengths, some of the potential weaknesses of his. If you want to get over to BetUS right now, if you're interested in getting in on the big game, they have a 150% sign-up bonus for your first deposit, 125% sign-up bonuses on your second and third deposits. I'm trying to find every prop bet and everything I can to just go in hard against the Chiefs because that's been my life for the last 2 weeks, is figuring out ways to hate the Chiefs. Got a bunch of clips here about Jeff Nixon. So we'll start in with Jeff Nixon. Nick and Nick and D'Amico are at the Senior Bowl right now. That's one thing that makes me not too worried about the announced interviews not being all that voluminous. You could interview 20 guys an hour if you wanted to at the Senior Bowl. Pretty much everybody from the NFL is swarming around there, and I'm guessing that they're having either casual or exploratory conversations with a lot of guys if they perhaps don't already have a plan in place. So I'm not too worried about the radio silence right now. As I mentioned, Kyle McCord led the nation in passing this year. He had 4,799 passing yards on 592 attempts. LaQuint Allen, the running back, led the NCAA in catches for running backs and had over 1,500 scrimmage yards. I know people have pointed out that Syracuse didn't have huge running numbers. They were like, their rushing stats were amongst the lowest in the league, but I think that was more of the fact that they were so pass heavy was more of a factor in that. It's not like they can't run the ball, but for what it's worth, Jeff Nixon has done most of his damage in college, both with play calling experience at Baylor and then obviously at Syracuse. He had one stint in Carolina at the end of the whichever season it was. Let me get this off of here. 2021, at the tail end of Matt Rule's job there. He lost all 5 games that he was the offensive coordinator, but the previous offensive coordinator who he was replacing that got fired, Joe Brady. So Joe Brady, who's done damn fine with the Bills, that was an offense that I don't think was going to make it with anybody at offensive coordinator that year. If you look at Sam Warren from the Chronicle, he was a receiver at Syracuse, so he's watched them pretty closely. Some interesting notes about Syracuse's offense with Jeff Nixon. Cuse liked to get the ball out quick. Kyle McCord was 5th in time to throw, and C.J. Stroud had the 4th highest time to throw in the NFL this season, 2.97 seconds. This is something that has been a question that we've all wondered and pondered is, all right, C.J. will hold on to the ball, and 2 years ago, it was really effective. This year, not as effective. And yet, how much of it was because in Bobby's offense, there weren't really hot routes. There weren't necessarily a whole lot of options underneath a lot of the time. I think CJ got better at checking the ball down as the season went along, but he was pressured at such an extremely high rate that there are times where he's waiting for the route to develop, and by the time he could have thrown the ball, he either had to bail on it. how much of that was design, how much of it was on CJ. I tend to lean more towards it was the design. And in this offense, the hot routes aren't really hot routes. It's just something that was designed into the play. And some of the shorter routes, if the guys aren't open, they're not open. If guys aren't threats, then they're not going to get open. And there just weren't necessarily as many options. So Jeff Nixon's intriguing. If we look at his career and kind of look at the length of it, because I'm going to want to compare it to Gerod Johnson's. The first, he had a few years, he had like a decade at some smaller colleges. Then he started off in the NFL in 2007, was with the Dolphins, with the 49ers, and then went to Baylor with Matt Rule. He and Matt Rule grew up together. They didn't grow up together, they went to high school together, both there in State College, PA. And Jeff Nixon would go on to play at Penn State, right there in State College, PA. Went to the Panthers, ended up being the interim offensive coordinator in 2021, and then the assistant head coach of the offense, or the assistant head coach in 2022. So I had the timeline screwed up there on the 2021 season. But that's him in a nutshell. I think the big question is going to be, all right, he's had success in college this last year to an extreme degree. He's been in coaching for about 20 years. How does that translate to the NFL, and how comfortable are they with what he learned at Carolina and in his other stays? Would they feel comfortable with him? I'll be surprised if he's the front-running candidate for them right now. I think it's somebody they're probably intrigued with. And just to get a look at Jeff Nixon himself, so you can put a face to the name. This is him doing an interview in 2020 or 21 in Carolina, where I'm guessing this was during COVID, because this is him talking about how much he likes having moved to Texas and still living in Texas.
To me, moving to Texas was great. And I have a son who plays high school football, and be able to move to Texas where, they take their football very serious down here, to be able to experience that, on Friday nights, like Friday Night Lights, here in Texas, and, being able to coach in this state has been great for my career.
So Texas has been good to him. And I don't know if he still has look, he's got a kid who was in high school at the time. It's a few years later. I don't want to make any HR violations by finding out his exact family situation. I would prefer my coaches to have very little regard for their family. Like all the great coaches. I'm just joking. I'm not that guy. I mean, it's not a check against them. I could give a damn if their home life is any good. Okay, I'm joking again with that. So this is the thing. As many of you know, I really like Gerod Johnson. I really, really like him. And I think that he's got a really what the hell? Hold on a second. I think he's got a really bright future. It's just that he doesn't have any play calling experience. When Matt Rule gave Jeff Nixon the play calling duties in 2021, this is what he had to say about it.
Made this decision, because I could have made Frizz or Sean or all those guys. At the end of the day, Jeff's the one guy who has, coordinating experience, calling plays on the staff, and that just to me just seemed like a natural fit, because everyone thinks they can call plays until, you have 11 guys looking at you like, what's the next play? And I don't know if they're going to zero blitz me or play cover two, and you have to stand up and make a call, and everyone afterwards can say that was a good call or bad call. It's just really hard to make the call, and so Jeff's done that, and he's done it through good moments and bad moments, and so to me that was the place of starting.
Yeah, and I think that right there in a nutshell, man. We all play Madden. We all feel like on the couch, I know exactly what they should have called, and we don't know everything that goes into it. And really, a lot of Bobby's shortcomings this year, I think what you could see was, I think he's got a great academic mind for football. It's a whole nother thing implementing it. And when week after week they would get up there and talk about how, well, it felt like we had some good plays dialed up, but the execution wasn't there. Right, yeah. That's on the offensive coordinator. He's got to coach the offensive line. He's got to coach the wide receivers. He's got to coach the quarterback himself and the running backs, by way of coaching the coaches, but also just having a really good understanding of all of that, and then how to make the adjustments within the game. And then from week to week, we just saw that wasn't there. And I think that when Bobby got the job and you looked at where the Texans were, you'd think, okay, well, like any offensive coordinator, there's going to be a learning curve and there's going to be some growing pains. And it probably looking at it at the time, you're like, all right, well, I can live with that. Texans are going to suck anyway, right? And then they screwed up and they got too good too fast. So right now for this team, what they need, I think, is somebody with a little bit of experience. And again, I really like Gerod Johnson. I mean, I like him personally. Even when I would watch him work with high school quarterbacks before he got into coaching full time, I liked a lot about everything that he brought to the table. Here's CJ talking about Jerrod. This was, I believe, during OTAs last year or sometime at the beginning of 2024. Jerrod and Bill Lazor are the guys that work most closely with CJ, and this is CJ talking about Gerod Johnson, who I believe CJ references it in here, but the first time they met was the Elite 11 camp way back when.
I've known Jerrod since I was 16. I was in the Elite 11 with him. He was my quarterback coach there. And one thing, man, I can say about Jerrod, man, is like when you talk about someone who knows how to play the position of quarterback and knows how to relay something, but also just a great person, man, a guy who loves football. He loves Houston. He loves Texas. He loves his family. He's a great family man. And somebody who's taught me just a tremendous amount of information. But on top of that, man, put a lot of confidence into me as well. Like when I was 16 at Elite 11, we did like this little like circle group. It was like all the quarterbacks in my group. And Jerrod's one thing for me was like, be confident. Because at that time, like I wasn't really the highest recruit. I wasn't who I will become, you know what I'm saying? And I always knew that it would be a possibility, but I didn't hear it out like those type of the Jerrod I looked up to, like he played at Texas A&M, I knew that, and stuff like that. And when he was like, man, you need to be more confident, like, and it was just like it changed my life, you know what I'm saying? And from there, like fast forward, I'm here with him my rookie year. It's been just a blessing to work with him, and whatever happens, man, I'm excited for him, and he deserves everything that's coming for him, and I'm super blessed to be able to work with him.
Yeah, and that's what CJ has basically said in different forms and using different words multiple times about Gerod Johnson. And Jerrod was really good with CJ in his first year. Shane Day was also there in the first year. He's now the quarterbacks coach with the Chargers. So for whatever influence Shane Day has had, and I haven't heard his name mentioned as a potential candidate or anything, but that might be out there. I'm not in a position where I'm going to blame Gerod Johnson or Bill Lazor for CJ taking a step back. I think we can all see with our eyes just what the challenges were on that offense in total. And CJ last year made improvements on the mechanical side of things. I think showed progression from a guy who was already pretty polished in college on the mechanic side of things. He got better last year. What I would hope is that Gerod Johnson's still on the staff. If he gets an opportunity elsewhere, especially I think because he's got to bring up his coaching here, this is his coaching experience in the NFL. He had 5 or 6 years as a player, and that counts for something. But he had a couple of fellowships, and then a couple of years as a quality control guy, 1 year as an assistant quarterbacks coach, and then these last couple of years as a quarterbacks coach. I think if he gets an opportunity, either as a passing game coordinator or as an offensive coordinator under an offensive-minded coach, that's probably the most likely path for him. Or if the Texans, this is the damn catch-22 of it all. If Bobby Slowick had done a good job this year, then if Bobby Slowick had done a good job this year, and then maybe Bobby Slowick got a job somewhere else, I think we'd all be feeling way more comfortable about an in-house hire. But I think the staff, not just for PR reasons, but D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio, and looking at it, they got to wonder, like, all right, we need a new voice and a new direction here. And it's probably got to come from somebody that's got more experience. So if I had to power rank the two guys that we know about right now, I would say Jeff Nixon probably over Gerod Johnson. I'll be surprised if either of these guys get the job. I'm not going to crush pretty much anybody they hire unless they just do something completely on the lunatic fringe. So that's where I am with that. I see a bunch of people mentioning Lance Zierlein's report about the argument or altercation, however you might want to frame it, that CJ and Bobby had before the draft last year in one of their pre-draft meetings. I I had heard that there was like some challenging going back and forth. Lance laid it out in much greater detail about how contentious he says that it got in this pre-draft meeting. I think the biggest thing I would say about that is that I think Bobby and CJ they've at various times hinted at the fact that, hey, they've butted heads in the past and neither of them are guys that worry too much about that. Like, frankly, I'm not worried about that either. I think CJ, for one, despite whatever the relationship might have evolved into, because remember, that was before they drafted CJ. So whatever the altercation was, that it didn't keep the Texans from thinking that CJ couldn't be a really good NFL quarterback. And CJ has been very, very good about expressing support for Bobby throughout this entire past 2 years. And CJ has alluded to, that they'll get in arguments or they'll butt heads, but they'll move beyond it. So whichever way you want to take that as either a mark against Bobby Slowick or a mark against CJ Stroud, I tend to think with stuff like that crap happens. Like, crap happens. Competitive guys get into heated conversations and we'll see. And I think like Lance is very plugged in, obviously, and I don't think that I think it's. I listened to it once, so I don't want to rephrase it and take Lance's words out of context or anything. But I don't think there's the fact that if it happened, it happened, but it was before the draft, and since then, and in the first year at least, it seemed to be a productive relationship. So we'll move on after that, and hopefully we'll never hear about it again, or at least we won't hear about it in the context of CJ and Bobby and what their working relationship was like, over the last couple of years. And that was I only heard the one little snippet of Lance. Maybe if there's more to it, then I'll try to get to it and listen to it a little bit more. But thanks to BetUS for sponsoring the video. Hopefully there's more candidates to talk about in the coming days. And if you enjoyed the content, I'm Seth Payne. I played for the Texans a long, long time ago. Every now and then I forget to hit end live stream, like yesterday when you could have watched me smack my lips and then look surprised. And I had to quick go through my brain and try to remember if I had said anything that could get me arrested or anything. But I was clean. You know what? Just for the hell of it. Oh, I don't have it. I've got Jeff Nixon, the defensive back, picking. No. I'm going to do this. Here we go. This is Jeff Nixon, the Buffalo defensive back, picking off Dan Pastorini while he was playing for the Raiders in, I believe, 1980.
Pastorini has Van Egan behind him, and Kenny King to his right. Another pass. Looking. He is rushed. Ben Williams after him. He throws. It is intercepted by Jeff Nixon at the 30-yard line. Jeff Nixon made a shoestring grab of the ball at the Buffalo 30-yard line.
There you go. So if there's one thing, at the very least, it did feel almost a little David Culley-ish like, in that when I first Googled Jeff Nixon, a bunch of Jeff Nixon highlights from the early 80s popped up. The difference is that Jeff Nixon had a very good year as an offensive coordinator with Syracuse last year, whereas David Culley had never had anything as an offensive coordinator or head coach or anything before that. So I'm not worried about that part of it. Have a good one, everybody. I'll catch up with you later.